All right. So, sometimes you're having nice dinner with your partner. Things are going really well. And then that credit
Yes.
card bill comes.
I
Or maybe you're talking about, saving for a vacation or something. And then
Yeah.
suddenly the mood just totally shifts. And it's amazing how quickly finances can turn like a romantic evening into a tense negotiation.
Yeah.
So, for this deep dive, we're going to unpack a lecture all about navigating this tricky territory of talking about money with your partner.
Okay.
And hopefully, by the end of it, you will have some new tools to make those money talks less stressful.
Hey, this is something almost everyone struggles with, and I think it's because we often forget that money isn't just about the numbers.
It's emotional.
Exactly. It's deeply intertwined with our sense of security, our
Yeah.
personal values, how we were raised.
Yeah.
And yes, even our self-worth can get tangled up in it. And when you combine all of that emotional baggage with the practicalities of managing finances, it's no wonder that money is the top source of conflict for couples, according to the American Psychological Association.
Wow, the number one source of conflict, that's pretty compelling reason to get better at these conversations.
Right.
The lecture uses a great example to illustrate this point.
Okay.
Imagine one partner is all about saving for the future. Maybe they even track every penny,
Mm-hmm.
while the other is more spontaneous, enjoys spending in the moment. On the surface, it looks like they're just being difficult. But the lecture argues it's actually a clash of values, often rooted in their childhood experiences.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating, isn't it?
It is, think about it, someone who grew up experiencing financial scarcity might be hyper-focused on saving and security.
Makes sense.
On the other hand, someone raised in an environment of abundance might be more comfortable taking risks, even financial ones.
Yeah.
It's not that one approach is inherently right or wrong,
Right.
but understanding those underlying values can completely change how you approach these conversations.
So instead of getting frustrated and thinking, why are you being so stubborn about this budget?
Exactly.
You can take a step back and say, okay, this is coming from a place of deep-seated values, maybe even anxieties.
Yeah,
That's got to take the heat out of the situation, right?
it does. It shifts the conversation from blame and judgment to empathy and understanding. Instead of saying, you're so irresponsible,
Right.
you can try something like, help me understand why saving is so important to you.
That's such a simple shift in language, but it feels so much more productive, almost like you're on the same team trying to solve a problem rather than adversaries in like a financial battle.
Totally.
I'm curious, though, understanding the psychology is great, but what about the actual nuts and bolts of managing money together? Do we just sit around and have deep conversations about our childhoods all day?
Well, those conversations are a great starting point, but you're right, we need to move beyond just understanding and into action.
Oh.
That's where clear, open communication comes in.
Okay, but how do we make sure that those conversations are actually productive? I mean, bills can be stressful, and it's easy to let emotions get the better of us.
It is, and that's why it's so important to establish a foundation of trust and transparency early on in a relationship.
Okay.
It's much easier to have open conversations about money when you've already built that sense of security and honesty.
So don't wait until you're in a full-blown financial crisis to start talking about money.
Exactly. Be proactive. Be open about your financial situation, your goals, even your fears.
I imagine this is especially important when you consider how many couples keep financial secrets, right?
Oh.
I remember reading a study by the National Endowment for Financial Education that found a surprising number of people hide money from their partners.
It's more common than you might think, and it can be incredibly damaging to a relationship. Even small secrets erode trust, and that lack of trust can make it nearly impossible to have healthy conversations about money.
It's almost like money becomes this secret code we're afraid to crack, even with the person we're supposed to be closest to.
I like that analogy. One partner might be intensely worried about the future, diligently saving every penny,
Mm-hmm.
while the other is more focused on enjoying the present, maybe prioritizing travel or experiences.
Yeah.
Both are perfectly valid perspectives. But if they're not communicating openly about those different priorities, it can lead to resentment and misunderstandings.
So it's about more than just sharing numbers.
Right.
It's about understanding the why behind those numbers, those underlying anxieties and motivations that might not always be obvious.
Absolutely. And there's another layer to consider here, one that can be a bit trickier to navigate,
Okay.
gender dynamics.
Oh, interesting. You mean how traditional gender roles might influence the way couples approach money? I have to admit, I'm a little surprised to hear that this is still relevant in today's world.
I know it can be surprising, but even in modern relationships, those deeply ingrained societal expectations can creep in.
So you're saying that even if we think we're being progressive and breaking free from traditional roles, there might still be these unconscious biases at play.
Exactly.
Can you give us an example of how these gender dynamics might show up in a couple's financial life?
Sure. Let's say you have a couple where the woman is naturally more cautious with money, prioritizing saving for the family's future,
Okay.
while the man, influenced by that traditional provider role, focuses more on his own investments and career advancement.
Interesting.
That dynamic can create tension, especially if the woman feels like her contributions to the family's financial well-being aren't being recognized or valued.
Wow. I see how that could breed resentment over time. It's not about who's right or wrong. It's about recognizing those unconscious scripts we might be carrying and having open, honest conversations about how they're impacting our relationship with money as a couple.
Precisely.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. The psychology behind money, the importance of open communication, and even the potential for unconscious gender dynamics to influence our financial decisions. It's a lot to process.
It is, but it's all interconnected. Understanding these different layers can help us approach money conversations with more empathy, clarity, and ultimately a better chance of finding solutions that work for both partners.
So for our listeners who are thinking, okay, this is all great information, but where do I even begin? What are some practical steps they can take to actually improve those money conversations with their partner?
Yeah, that's a great question, and the lecture offers some really helpful advice. First and foremost, start with transparency.
Okay.
Don't wait for a financial crisis to have these conversations. Be open about your financial situation from the beginning of the relationship.
Hmm.
Share your income, your debts, your credit score. It might feel a little awkward at first, but establishing that foundation of honesty early on can save you a lot of headaches down the road.
It makes sense if you're already comfortable talking about money when things are good. It's going to be a lot easier to navigate those tougher conversations when challenges inevitably arise.
For sure.
What else can couples do to get on the same page financially?
Budgeting is key, even if you decide to keep your finances separate.
Okay.
Creating a budget together, even a simple one, forces you to align on your priorities and make conscious decisions about how you're going to spend your money as a team.
I like that you emphasized as a team, it's not about one person controlling the finances, it's about working together towards shared goals. Are there any particular budgeting methods or tools that you find helpful for couples?
There are so many different approaches, and what works best really depends on the couple's individual needs and preferences. Some couples swear by the 50-30-20 method, where 50% of your income goes towards needs, 30% towards wants, and 20% towards savings and debt repayment.
Yeah.
Others prefer the envelope system, which involves physically dividing cash into envelopes for different spending categories. And of course, there are tons of budgeting apps out there that can help couples track their spending and stay on top of their finances.
So many options. I think the key takeaway here is that it's less about finding the perfect method and more about finding something that you can both stick to and that helps you achieve your financial goals as a couple.
Exactly. And speaking of goals,
Mhm.
it's crucial to talk about big purchases together.
Yes.
Don't surprise your partner with a new car or a spontaneous trip to Europe.
Right.
Those kinds of decisions need to be made as a team with open communication and a clear understanding of the financial implications.
Oh, absolutely. Nothing good ever comes from like, honey, I bought a boat moments.
Right.
Yeah.
And those big purchases are often where those unconscious gender dynamics we talked about earlier can really come into play.
Hmm.
If one partner is making major financial decisions without consulting the other, it can create a power imbalance and lead to resentment down the road.
That makes a lot of sense. So, transparency, budgeting, making big decisions together. These are all really solid practical steps. But what about those inevitable moments of conflict? Money talks can get heated even when we have the best intentions. What advice does the lecture offer for navigating those tough conversations?
The key is to remember that you're on the same team even when it feels like you're on opposite sides of the negotiating table. Go into those conversations with a solution-oriented mindset. Instead of focusing on blame you spend too much or you never save enough, try to find common ground and work towards a compromise that feels fair to both of you.
So instead of saying you always overspend on groceries, you could say something like, let's look at our grocery spending together and see if there are any areas where we can cut back without sacrificing the quality of food we buy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about approaching the conversation with curiosity and a willingness to understand your partner's perspective, even if you don't agree with it.
It sounds like the overarching message here is that financial discussions are an opportunity, not a relationship killer.
Absolutely. They're a chance to understand each other better, build trust, and work together to create a financial future that aligns with your shared values and goals.
I love that. Reframing. Instead of dreading those money talks, we can view them as a way to strengthen our bond as a couple. Of course, that's easier said than done, especially if you've already developed some negative patterns around money. For those listeners who are feeling overwhelmed, what's one small step they can take this week to improve their financial communication?
A great place to start is with a simple check-in. Set aside some time, maybe over a cup of coffee, and just ask your partner, how are we feeling about our finances right now?
Okay.
Doesn't have to be a deep dive into the budget or a heated debate about spending habits, just a gentle opening of the door to communication.
Simple yet powerful. Just that initial conversation can pave the way for deeper understanding and more productive discussions down the road.
Exactly.
It's like planting a seed, right? Just starting that conversation can lead to something really beautiful and beneficial for the relationship. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, what would you say is the most important takeaway for our listeners?
I think the biggest takeaway is that talking about money doesn't have to be a dreaded experience. It doesn't have to be a relationship killer. In fact, when approached with the right mindset, those conversations can actually be a pathway to a deeper connection with your partner.
It's almost like a reframing, isn't it? Instead of approaching money talks with fear and anxiety, we can view them as an opportunity to build trust, understand each other's values and priorities, and ultimately create a shared vision for our financial future.
Absolutely. And that shared vision is what can really bring couples together when you're working towards common goals, supporting each other's dreams, and making financial decisions as a team. It strengthens your bond and creates a sense of unity that can carry you through any challenge.
It's inspiring to think about, isn't it? Those money talks that we often dread can actually become a source of strength and connection in our relationships. So, for our listeners who are ready to take that first step, what's one action they can commit to this week to improve their financial communication with their partner?
I'd encourage everyone to try that simple check-in we talked about earlier. Find a quiet moment, maybe during dinner or while you're relaxing on the couch, and just ask your partner, how are we feeling about our finances right now? Listen to their response with an open mind and heart and see where the conversation leads you. You might be surprised at how much closer that one simple question can bring you.
That's such great advice. And remember, it's a journey, not a race. Be kind to yourself, celebrate the small wins, and don't be afraid to ask for help if you need it. There are so many resources available, including those we've linked in the show notes.
Exactly. You don't have to figure this out alone.
Yeah.
There are financial advisors, therapists, even online communities where you can connect with other couples who are navigating the same challenges.